Welcome back to TV47 News Tonight. Thank you for staying with us. Now, of politics of debt and their repayments, our guest tonight believes that Mount Kenya owes ODM boss Raila Odinga a debt and that it should pay. Tonight we speak to Laikipia Governor Ndiritu Muriithi, who joins us on the broadcast. Good evening, Governor. Thank you for your time tonight on TV47.
Good evening, Abubakar. I'm happy to be here.
All right, pleasure, Governor. Let's start talking of the politics of debt. Last week, while you were speaking at a function, you said, and perhaps I can quote, "I'm a person from finance. We agree we have debts to repay. Debts are paid from the oldest. There is a huge 2022 debt owed to Raila. I have met Karatina people on my way and they agreed there is a debt." I wonder, is it the governor speaking or you are speaking on behalf of the people of your county and by extension, Central Kenya, Governor?
First of all, good evening to all your viewers. I thought that, firstly, you're talking about financial debt, when we borrow as a nation or when we borrow as counties. But be that as it may, Abubakar, I made a rather straightforward point that to those who argue that Mount Kenya owes political debts, then obviously it would be more prudent to start by paying the oldest debts that you have. So it's a very straightforward point that if in fact you do owe political debts, then the prudent thing to do is to pay the first ones first. We say in finance, like fast in, fast out.
All right.
So it was in that context, yes.
All right, Governor, and for purpose of curiosity, who owes Mount Kenya first then, in your own view?
No, you see, if you look at Kenya, the politics of Kenya historically, it has been basically politics of handshake. And coalitions. A handshake is essentially a coalition. And if you go back to 1963, what you will see is that in fact the late Jaramogi insists that there can be no independence until Jomo Kenyatta is released from detention. And subsequently, Jomo Kenyatta is released and becomes prime minister and ultimately president. If you look at, at the Kenyatta succession, if you look at the transition from President Kenyatta to President Moi, again, you see a coalition between President Moi and the third president, that is President Kibaki, as well as Mr. Jonjo and Mr. Gigi Kariuki. And that is coalition that gets into power in 1978. If you look at the transition from President Moi to President Kibaki, again, you will see a coalition between President Kibaki, the late Vice President Wamalwa, and so on, as well as the LDP, which was then led by Raila Odinga. And Raila Odinga then famously says, Kibaki Tosha at Uhuru Park, and that's the coalition. In fact, it was then called the National Rainbow Coalition, and that's the coalition that goes to power in 2003. If you fast forward to 2008, again, the Party of National Unity, which took power, or which was the one in power, was actually a coalition. It was PNU is a party of parties. And then PNU forms an even bigger coalition with ODM. That's then the grand coalition, sometimes famously referred to as Nusu Mkate. And that's the coalition that proceeds to 2013. 2013 is another coalition between the TNA, led by President Uhuru, and URP, which was led by the Deputy President William Ruto. So Kenya has a history of coalitions And really one needs to see it in that context. If you would interpret where we are politically and what is the best way to proceed forward. So I would expect it is more coalitions, and coalitions look to history, but they also, of course, look into the future in terms of what we want to achieve in any particular coalition.
Governor, you say these are of coalitions. You made that statement, and you are not alone to seemingly suggest as though there was a political debt owed that need to be repaid. There are other high-ranking politicians from central Kenya who at the same event talked of this political debt, which begs the question, Governor, for those who objectively look at those statements and assume as though that is a direct endorsement of Raila Odinga come 2022. Are they wrong to assume that?
No, you see, I think one has to interpret politics. You have to interpret in the way you see that events are unfolding. But the reality is that as Mount Kenya considers who, first of all, whether we as Mount Kenya are going to have a presidential candidate, and if we are not going to have a presidential candidate, who or which candidate might we negotiate with? Because remember, politics is about interest. So it is, you must interpret it in that context. And without a doubt, Raila Odinga is one quite potential partner for Mount Kenya. And in fact, the context in which we were talking was that if you look at when he supported Kibaki in 2002, during the Kibaki Tosha, he was received as a hero in most of central Kenya because of that coalition. So I think one have to examine it in that context and to say that obviously Raila Odinga is a leading contender and he has been in coalition with central Kenya before, most specifically during the time of Kibaki won, but also in this context of the current handshake, which sometimes is referred to also as BBI. So in that context, you will see that he is a leading contender. And I think all people agree that he is a leading contender and one that central Kenya may negotiate with among others, indeed.
All right, from the politics of debt, Governor, let's talk of the politics of central Kenya now as a region. We are hearing of talks of the East and West, which again points out as though there is a political friction in the mountain. Is it so, to begin with?
I don't think so. I think that the Mount Kenya region, the people of Mount Kenya, whether they live within the region itself or they are in diaspora, for example, if you think about Narok or Uasin Gishu or Lamu and many other places in Kenya, the peoples of Mount Kenya are looking to move together in unity in 2022. So of course discussions are going on and different people either volunteering themselves or being volunteered as potential leaders of the Mount Kenya region. So those kinds of conversations, Abubakar, you must expect they'll be there because leadership is developed. Leadership emerges from many discussions amongst people.
Governor, let me interject you at that point. You say the mountain seemingly is moving together, painting a picture of a united people. But if the by-elections recently held are the litmus test, it seems as though that assertion is not entirely true, Governor, is it?
Well, I wouldn't put a lot of premium on by-elections. If you think, for example, in the run-up to the Jubilee government in 2013, the NAC Kenya, led by Martha Karua, was in fact the one that was performing the best in by-elections. You may not recall, but they won Makadara, they won Juja in the run-up to the general election of 2013. But at the general election, they performed dismally. So I wouldn't put so much premium or too much premium on the outcomes of the by-election, because the dynamic of a by-election is such that you are looking at a very short period of time for somebody to be in office. Quite often people don't really want, political parties don't invest too much in by-elections that are very close to the general election, such as now. But what I'm trying to explain to you is this, and to Kenyans, the fact that there are discussions around Mount Kenya by different political leaders, and even economic and other, including religious leaders and so on, those discussions are healthy. That is what democracy is made of. So I don't think you should be concluding that because there are discussions, it means that we are disunited. What you should conclude is that we are doing our job, which is to caucus amongst ourselves and amongst our people, and to identify leaders the next crop of leaders that will be at the forefront for this region in the coming 5 or 10 years. So I think it is a very healthy thing, and I don't think you should interpret it to mean that we are disunited.
All right, and given that we are talking of politics and the messaging of it, let's get to that. We have seen lately politicians, Governor, and you will agree or disagree with me, fumble trying to explain what different economic models are. For instance, we have seen, and these were interviews in media houses, inclusive of TV47, some politicians fumbling, trying to explain what the bottom-up economic model is, others entirely getting it wrong on the trickle-down economics. And I ask you this question not as a governor, not as a politician, but as an economist who, of course, has experience in the finance sector. Just for purpose of clarity, what is the distinction between these two highly touted models that we are hearing of now, Governor?
Well, first of all, Abubakar, both these slogans are discredited slogans from an economic point of view. They are discredited, so I'm not even sure that really you should be giving them airtime. Let's talk real economics and what is going on in Kenya and also globally. What you will see is that real wages is, when we take your salary and we remove the effect of inflation, real wages are not increasing. They are basically stagnant. So when you hear people complaining that they feel something is wrong with the economy, that they don't feel wealthy, they don't feel like they have money in their pocket, it is because real incomes are not increasing and have remained stagnant for a number of years. Now, that's what economists need to solve. Now, you will not solve it with a slogan, whichever slogan you want to adopt, Abubakar, you will not solve it. What you must do is figure out how to increase productivity at the small business level, at the household level, at the farm level. So that now, if you go to, say, Laikipia County and you say, what is the yield per acre for a farmer in Olmoran, for a farmer in Muriithi, or for a farmer in Old Jabet, that's how you solve it. What you must ask yourself is, the millions of small businesses in Kenya, how do we meaningfully increase their productivity? Because by increasing their productivity, that is how you create jobs, and that is how you increase the income of the people who work in those small businesses.
But Governor,
so
let me ask you this: is that increase in productivity not what some have fashioned as though it will be getting money to the pockets of people through a bottom-up economic model?
As I've said to you, Abubakar, because first of all, I don't subscribe to these slogans myself. So I may not be able to defend them. And as I've already told you, they are both discredited. Now, and the idea of what was historically referred to as trickle-down, that when you do the big infrastructure or the big projects, the impact, the impacts of those projects will then be felt across the system, and what now is being touted, what you're referring to as bottom up, presumably that you start at the bottom of the pyramid, as the financial people often talk about. But both these slogans are actually discredited slogans. What we should be talking about, Abubakar, is how do we focus on manufacturing? How do we ensure that Kenya is a manufacturing nation so that you can create meaningful jobs? For the existing businesses, there are millions of micro and small businesses that exist in Kenya. How do we assist them increase their productivity so that their profits are increasing and they are able to pay higher and higher wages to the people who work with them? Now that requires a rethinking, a fundamental rethinking of some of the things we have been doing. I want to give you two examples, Abubakar. If you think about the EPZ program, now the EPZ program has been with us for more than 30 years, from 1990. This program gives incentives to you. If you are putting up a factory in the EPZ zone and you are importing machines, the incentive is that you get to import the machines duty-free or tax-free. But if you are buying Kenyan-made machines, then you'll end up paying taxes. So the incentive is actually a disincentive for manufacturing of machines and equipment in Kenya. And you will see that kind of thing repeated over and over in many of the systems we have created. I think you've seen us in very serious debate with the National Transport and Safety Authority, NTSA, and KRA, because their systems, the NTSA system, when it was created, it is called the Transport Integrated Management System. It did not contemplate that motor vehicles would be manufactured in Kenya. So it requires you to have a customs entry, which is a bit, odd when you are manufacturing in Kenya. So what we should be focusing on is not these slogans, but real things like growing manufacturing, ensuring that we create incentives that promote the manufacture or the making of tools and machines by Kenyans, because they actually are able to do so. It's also how you then utilize the very abundant natural resources that we have, as well as agricultural produce, because all of these are raw materials into manufacturing and agricultural processing. So those are the things we should be talking about, not really these slogans that are being thrown up and down.
Governor, the models aside, when Kenya's 2010 was promulgated, which ushered the 47 counties and devolution, it was painted as though it will be the silver bullet to Kenya's perennial problems, key among them, eradicate poverty, given that resources are getting to the people and it's more localized than a national-centric economics. Years later, Governor, we are talking of an economy, we are talking of people who are feeling the pinch of an economy that is not necessarily performing as per the optimal performance. What then has become of devolution, Governor? And you are a governor yourself.
Well, Abubakar, first of all, devolution was a political bargain. Devolution was a political bargain. Now, if you think about the events of 2007 and early 2008, we come to blows with one another. We are blaming one another. So communities are blaming other communities for their feeling of economic stagnation. So the political bargain was that, look, why don't we create a system where people can be in charge of their own development in their respective areas, so that we stop this blame game. Secondly, Abubakar, you see, in economics, we talk about making decisions where they are needed. For instance, if a small bridge needs repair here in Nanyuki, that decision should not have to go to Nairobi. The people around there can see that the bridge requires repair. We just should be sure that they have the capacity or the resources to repair their bridge. Now, is devolution working? Absolutely. Look, county economies are growing very rapidly. If you look at Elgeyo Marakwet is the fastest growing county economy at nearly 10%, followed by Nyandarua, followed by Laikipia. My own economy is growing at around 9%. For instance, since I have been in office, our business register has doubled. That is, the number of people who have taken out the single business permit from us has doubled from about 13,000 to 26,000 businesses. The number of people employed in those businesses has grown from about 22,000 to just over 40,000, meaning we have created in that small business sector an additional 19,000 jobs. An additional 19,000 jobs. And that is just my own county. So devolution is working amazingly. If you look at many, many towns in Kenya today, you will find rapid improvements in urban infrastructure because of counties. If you look at the health sector, by the way, many people from the Ministry of Health, when they visit our hospitals, you see them getting surprised that these hospitals are clean, they are neat, they are orderly, they are serving thousands of people, they have medicines and so on. They are surprised at these things. One senior official from the Ministry of Health told me recently that, oh my goodness, your hospital is very clean for a public hospital. Why? Because they are used to, they are not used to this level of service. My health system treats over 3,500 people per day, not per month, per day, Abubakar. These things would not have been possible without devolution. In my own county, for example, in the last 12 months, we have graveled, yani kuweka maram, we have graveled over 500 kilometers of roads just in Laikipia alone. We have graded over 1,200 kilometers of roads alone, in Laikipia alone, just in a period of about 15 months.
All right.
These things would be possible without devolution. Devolution is working.
All right, Governor, and it will be very unfair if I don't ask you this final question that touches on Laikipia County. You faulted the members of County Assembly for failing to approve 1.16 billion shillings infrastructural bond. The MCA said the bond will burden the residents given that it was a debt. In less than 30 seconds.
Well, a lot of infrastructure in Kenya today is built on debt. Those of you who are financial experts know that debt is not necessarily a bad thing. You just have to manage it properly. And in any case, we went out for public participation, and thousands of Laikipians okayed this debt. So it's a bit unfortunate, the interpretation given at the assembly. But nonetheless, discussions are going on because there were some other larger issues within the budget process that need to be relooked at so that we are within the law.
All right, Governor, that's where we will have to end this discussion. Thank you for your time tonight on TV47.
Asante sana and good night.
All right, Ndiritu Muriithi is the governor, Laikipia County.